Hey, Joe, good to see you again. Thank you for being here for this decompression session on the 24th of January.
Absolutely, it was had to pull myself up to make it here from the just getting back from the trip from Hawaii.
That's right. You and the family took a little bit of time to yourselves and you went to Hawaii and just wanted to acknowledge to everybody who's here or watching that you got back specifically to be able to be here to share in this decompression session. So thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my honor and privilege. We're all in this together. So it's great to be here, and it's actually a really good topic that we have today. So it's kind of exciting. Coming back from holiday, this kind of stuff happens. So it's
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah.
And just for anybody, if you haven't gone to the Pearl Harbor memorial thing, it is a fantastic reminder of how some of the things that have happened to our country and how we got to where we are today.
Right. Very cool. Well, let's talk about today's subject. I'm going to share my screen here and go to our little PowerPoint presentation because we talked about this decompression session today as being the thing that sometimes stuff happens, things that are not planned. There are things that occur in life for which you cannot plan because they originate from a sphere of influence that's completely outside your control. An earthquake, a pipe breaks in your home, somebody, drives through the front of your building, with their car, stuff like that, and completely destroys all your equipment. Things can happen that you have absolutely no control over, right?
That is absolutely correct. And it could be everything from personal stuff, business stuff, and they all interrelate. But accept that stuff is going to happen, stuff that you didn't plan for. Almost embrace it. It's like, guess what? There's stuff's going to happen, and it's how we respond to those situations that make a difference on where we're going to go in our trajectory in our business and our
Right.
lives.
Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at scenarios and having plans of action for what you could predict as a possible scenario for your business, for your life, or whatever. You should be looking at contingency planning if things that you can anticipate might happen, but there's
Right.
things that just kind of come at you from out of the blue.
That you don't expect. I an airline delay,
Yeah,
get stuck at the airport, weather. There's a lot of things that you just can't anticipate. And yeah, you can, and it's how we put those and react to those plans. I'm trying to remember who says it. Everybody has a plan till you get hit in the face. Mike Tyson.
yeah, Mike Tyson. Yeah, yeah.
and and excuse me, excuse me. There's another one that I just forgot.
But you mentioned you used an airline as an example, and I think let's take that one just a step further. Everybody may have seen this news item, but about 2 weeks ago, an Alaska Airlines 737 Max took off from Portland Airport, got up to elevation, and one of the doors on the plane blew out.
Yep.
Not expected, couldn't plan for, no contingency. How does this happen? Who knows? But all of a sudden, the pilot and the crew and the passengers are now in a situation for which they have absolutely no expectation of what to do, completely unanticipated. So things can happen that are, when everything looks like it's going along swimmingly, and then all of a sudden, kaboom. And like you said, it could be a personal issue. You could have
Yep.
a heart attack, it
Yeah.
could be anything.
Well, and we can use that one as an example because there are times to react and there are times to respond.
Right.
When that happens, the pilot must react based on the training that he's had, muscle memory on, okay, what do we do for this scenario? And that's a reaction that has to happen right then. The flight attendants have to react. Everything has to react there. and then the response from the passengers, they're reacting, but how do they respond? Are they, stay calm? That's one of the big ones. Is a lot of times when we react, we lose our thinking process. The fight or
Right,
flight, uh, uh, um, the fight or flight scenario takes place, and we
right.
react. And
Let's
sometimes
take a
that's
look at that, because I think we talked about that a little bit in our presentation here, where it's like, the question about what do you do when a random event happens, something that you couldn't anticipate, and whether it's negative or positive, it can completely derail your plan and the game plan, as we've already identified. And so you mentioned the two things. There's reaction and there's a response, and th're distinctly different things. Yes?
very different. And knowing
So
when to respond or react. Yeah.
how would you define or react, and how would you define respond?
So react if there's harm, you're in harm's way. There's something that you have to react to, like the door fight. The pilot has to react right then. Doesn't have time to think about necessarily. You're reacting based on your training.
Okay.
So it is a response, but it's reaction. Typically, when we react, it's fight or flight. It would be really a bad thing if the pilot decided to fly and jump out of the airplane with a parachute. Probably
Right.
not a good reaction. I'm saving myself. Goodbye. But he's been trained to respond accordingly. So that react respond reaction. There might fire or something. There's something that you have to react, but the reaction should be a response to your training if possible.
Well,
Because
I think
reaction is
you
emotion.
just hit it.
Yeah,
There
go
you
ahead.
go. You hit it in terms of training. If you have trained for a scenario and that scenario occurs, and then you're you respond to the scenario based on your training.
Yes.
I've always thought of reaction as being a much more emotional response to something, because when things happen and people either get scared or they get mad or they get confused, they kind of reach out or lash out or whatever based on that emotional trigger, and that doesn't necessarily help them resolve whatever the situation is.
Absolutely.
Whereas
So
a
it is
response, yeah,
is a logical thought, some logic put into place, or you're incorporating your training that you've had
yes,
to
there you go.
respond to the situation. And
Right.
that responding is typically much better than reacting, because reacting is either fight or flight. And neither one of them might be the appropriate response at that space
Right,
and time.
right. Very cool. And let's get back into this to see if there's anything else relative, because I think the key thing here we have to understand is, as a business owner, when stuff happens, you need to be able to respond and not just react. And you identified several things that you should be able to, or you should be able, it's not the right terminology, that we counsel that you steel yourself to be able to do. And the first one is to take time out. And when you say take time out, what exactly do you mean there?
So Bob Berg talks about this was in Adversaries to Allies, but it's taken that 5 seconds. Breathe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, how do I respond? If we can, now there might be a situation, there's fire, you don't have time, is fight or flight reaction. But if we can respond, customer service is a critical one on this, where the training on how to deal with an irate client, an irate customer, that training will serve us extremely well as we're
Mhm.
responding in the appropriate manner. So
Right.
the better the training, the better the response. And we get out of the react mode to the response mode. This is what the military does. This is what pilots do. This is what our managers should be doing. How do we respond to different situations? And there's a lot of things you can do training for that's going to happen. We know it's going to happen.
Hmm.
So it's that training for the response versus the react. So timeout. How do I respond?
You,
And
you
then
mentioned you mentioned customer service as an area, and I think that's an area because I've been on both the sending and the receiving side of a customer service situation where the you blurt out something that is aggressive
Yes,
toward the service customer service person, or or the service person to whom something aggressive has been blurted out. And the question is, do you then, that's going to be a trigger, that's an emotional trigger. If you can't,
absolutely.
if you don't take that 4 or 5, 10 seconds just to kind of like take a deep breath and relax before you go back into the thing, because the other person is lashing out not because they don't like you. They're frustrated with whatever the situation is, and they don't know. And their frustration is what's speaking. They're not mad at you necessarily.
Right.
They're upset with the situation.
Exactly the situation. So the training can actually help you respond accordingly versus react, which is typically if someone's aggressive, you're going to fight or flight.
Right.
It's that clash, and it just escalates up. So by boom, de-escalating the situation with our response is where we want to get to. And in business, typically reactions aren't very good. It's the response that gets us to where we want to go.
Gets us to where we want to go. Okay, good. So first is take the time out. The second was thoroughly evaluate the event and its ramifications. Now, what are we talking about here?
So what happened. You at some space in time you want to go back what caused it, but right now it's typically the response. How do we get through it to keep making progress and evaluate it in as we go in the past? But you got to do a timeout. What's happening? How do we get past this? How do we get to where we want to go? So
Yeah.
right after this, you start the analyzing of the situation so that you can look at your options on how to proceed.
Let's pursue the customer service example as another one. So now the person's lashed out, but then you've taken a few seconds and you say, Mr. Smith, let's take a closer look at what the scenario is so I can understand, and maybe I know I can identify the best way to solve your problem, because
Yeah,
there's things that you
gathering
might
the
be missing in
facts.
the way of information.
Absolutely. So it's gathering the facts, putting that together, and this is where communication really starts coming in, having that updates on what's happening. I want to give you an example. I was at the hotel in Hawaii, and I went in and I actually requested something very unusual. And the lady says, it's going to take me a couple of minutes to go figure this out. I wanted to get a tattoo for my granddaughter, not a real tattoo, a
Right.
fake
Yeah.
tattoo.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh boy, this is and so she took off and she was gone for like 5, 7, 8 minutes, and I was getting a little, okay, so should I stay or should I go? What's it? And she called up to the front desk and said, tell him I'm working on it and I'm looking for ways to handle this. And that just that communication of, hey, I haven't forgotten about you is critical. So
Hmm.
at times like this, over communicate versus under communicate is critical. It's like, hey, I'm aware of that. Um, I'll give you an
What
opposite scenario.
what
Is I asked a question and nobody answered me, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? They're like, I'm working on
Mhm.
it. All you had to do is tell me, hey, give me a few minutes to work on it, and my level of anxiety goes way down.
What that does, the communication from the other person creates a scenario where you don't feel like you have to react to the situation. The situation being, I have had no communication. I don't know what's going on. I've asked for something. I don't know what's going on, and I've got a time thing. I got to deal with this now, right? So the response or the communication from the customer service agent and whoever it might be, whether provides an answer to the question and allows you, whether it's the final answer, it lets you know that you haven't been forgotten, and I think that's critical.
That is the most. Hey, you know what? I think I understand the situation. I gathered the data. Let me go find some solutions. It may take a few minutes.
Perfect.
Fantastic. But it's like
Okay.
you tell them the situation and you don't know what's going on. Your brain goes to the negative places.
Right. All right. So we've taken a few time out. You've evaluated the event and its ramifications, figured out what's happening and what you might need to do. Then you assess your options. So in this case, taking the example that you had identified from your question with the person at the hotel, she was trying to figure out, where do I go? Who do I talk to? How can I solve this problem? And she went off, and it sounds like she was checking with multiple possibilities to be able to satisfy their request. And that's what you need to do. You need to look at, it may only be one option, but there might be two, there might be five. But if you don't know what your options are, then you will not necessarily respond appropriately.
And they went above and beyond helping me find the answer. They could have just said, "Nope, we don't have that. Goodbye." And I would have dealt with that. I wouldn't have been nearly as happy as when they found a solution. It wasn't exactly what I was looking for. They found stickers instead of a
Yeah,
temporary ticket. You know what?
it worked.
Wow, it worked. So what they did is you looked at the situation, gathered the data, what could we do, looked at the options, found the best option for that specific space and time, and presented it. And wow, what a great job from a customer service standpoint. Ecstatic.
Exactly.
But,
Fantastic. Okay. So
but then by
now,
doing the timeout, evaluating the options, assessing your options, and then
boom, take action.
take action.
And this sounds simplistic. Take time out, evaluate, assess your options, and then take action. It sounds extremely simplistic, but in the middle of this kind of confusion that's created by a completely random event, if you don't do these four things, then you're flailing. You're just throwing darts and seeing if anything happens. You don't have a clear um, path to follow in order to try to resolve the situation or to get yourself out of trouble or to find a way to communicate or whatever it happens to be. So you got to do, if you do these four simple things, as simple as they may seem, it's going to have a huge impact on your ability to have a positive outcome to a random situation.
But you know what's the funnest thing about this, Dave? Is you can
What?
actually practice this.
You can practice this. Talk about that.
Yes, yeah. Well, so you can pretend, make up a situation, what happened, and not that you're going to have that specific situation, but it's the reaction to a unexpected situation.
Mm,
Oh, okay. What would happen if you I go out in my car, engine falls out of my car. How do I respond? And it's going through the practice of those four steps that will allow you to incorporate those four steps when something unexpected does happen.
oh, that's very cool. That's very
Yeah.
cool.
So
You
so
could
this is
actually, I can see how you could actually play that as a game in a staff
yes.
meeting.
This is a role play game. This is hey, what happens if this happens? And well, okay, how about assess the situation? And you walk through the four steps, and then when something does happen that's unexpected, you understand the process of doing that.
Makes
Not that
sense.
you can never do every scenario planning that's possible, but you can scenario plan on how to respond to a
Yeah,
unexpected
how to
situation.
respond. Yeah, and there you go. That's it. Plan on how to respond.
Plan on how to respond to an unexpected situation and the severity of the situation. An earthquake. Guess what? We do earthquake. We how many times have in school you do the earthquake
Yeah,
with
right.
earthquake? You're following those four steps.
Yeah, very cool. So you had mentioned earlier when we were talking about this upcoming decompression session, Joe, you had made a comment about one of the items that's in our training.
Oh yes, yes. One of the ways, if you have time and can to evaluate that, we actually have a course called Decision Process Made Easy,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
it's in the
a
mindset series.
Yes, and it's a technique or tools that we use to actually go through a process. It takes about 15 minutes to to look at all of your options and pick the best option moving forward. And it's a quantitative approach to decision making versus an emotional response to decision making. So sometimes you have time for this, sometimes you don't. But if you're vacillating on a situation and not figuring out how to move forward, those tools, the quantitative pros and cons analysis and the weighted decision matrix, are two tools you want to have in your toolbox for making a decision, especially if it's an important decision or a strategic decision moving forward.
Makes sense. I'm going to add one piece of information to that, and that is once a random situation happens, you're going to have an emotional response. We're humans, and that's part of
Yes,
being human, which is one of the exciting things about being human is we have these emotions and we can feel love and feel frustration and feel anger and feel joy and feel euphoria. But there's a difference between reacting based on emotion and allowing yourself to experience the emotion and then do the kind of logical assessment and processing that you just talked about, which is a trained, a learned skill. And we can help you learn that skill through the information that's in the Mindset series. So that's definitely a very cool thing.
and that's one of the things that we learn with the brainshare.us program.
Very cool. Well, Joe, thank you very much. I appreciate your being back in time to do this decompression session. And we will see you in 2 weeks at our next decompression session. See you later.
See you later, Dave. It's been an honor and privilege. Any questions that you got, feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for.